Hi, everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Erin Kinan. I'm the Vice President for Civic Engagement at Bard College at the Center for Civic Engagement, and also on the Civic Engagement Open Society University Network Initiative team. This is a collaboration between the Open Society University Network, or OSUN, as we refer to it, and the Telwar Network. OSUN is a global partnership of educational institutions that integrates learning and the advancement of knowledge across geographic and demographic boundaries, promotes civic engagement on behalf of open societies, and expands access to higher education for underserved communities. The Telwar Network is a network of engaged universities, growing global coalitions with now 421 university presidents, vice chancellors, and rectors in 83 countries who have publicly committed to strengthening the civic roles and social responsibilities of their institutions. This Communiversity workshop series has been organized to help showcase university civic engagement approaches, including frameworks, strategies, methods, and practices that have been shown to produce favorable results and that represent a standard suitable for adoption for engaged research. We're pleased today to welcome a longtime colleague of mine, Laura Conruther, who began teaching at Bard in 2001. She's a professor of anthropology with teaching and research interests that center on themes such as cultural memory, urban public culture, post-colonial theory, technology and media, social suffering, affect, sound, and voice. She's here to talk a little bit about a project that she's been working on over the past year, and we're really excited to have her join us today. So as folks who are interested in applying to the OSUN Engaged Research Fund, which helped partially fund Laura's project that she's been working on this past year, can kind of get a sense of the types of projects that faculty and graduate students have been working on throughout this past year. So Laura, I'm going to turn the floor over to you. Welcome. Thank you so much for hosting us today and describing your work and sharing it with us.
Great, thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. What is for some of us very early in the morning, and for some of us it's the afternoon. I am going to start with, I'm going to share my screen. I just want to say that I am joined here with some of my collaborators, and they will also be speaking after I give a kind of overview of the project and how it evolved. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Let's just see here. Okay, can everyone see that okay? So this is just, in many ways, we're going to go through the story of how this project developed, which is largely a story that was made possible by the pandemic, and also which forced a lot of innovation on my part. So I'm going to, okay. So I'm going to be speaking for maybe 30, 40 minutes, something like that, and talking about the sort of evolution. We're also going to be joined by four, possibly three of my collaborators. There's Shushu Gomez, who is an interpreter and a research collaborator. It's been with me since the beginning, last January of 2021. He was a main protagonist in the film that they're making. Camoso Jean-Bertrand, who's also an interpreter and collaborator, also been with me since last January. He was the director. Mulki Muhammad Ali, who is an interpreter, research collaborator, and she worked on the sound. she did the sound, and then Adam Mohammed Bashar, who is an interpreter, research collaborator, and worked on the camera work. Okay, so what we're going to do over the course of this time together is we're going to talk about research, the movement of what started as basically my individual research project into a collective project of filmmaking, and the evolution of this over the course because of the pandemic. And what we have sort of learned through that story, or what I have learned in particular, is this movement that it sort of evolved very organically from working together on other representations of interpretation and interpreters' work to a kind of self-representation of interpreters' daily lives. We will show a few clips of the film that is in the process of being edited right now. They are raw, I will say, so they're unedited, they're very short, but just to give you a little sense of where this project has gone. And my collaborators will share their own reflections on the research project, research process, and the challenges faced in producing the film that's called The Bridge. So the project began with my own research that was, I should just say that I'm an anthropologist, and I had a bigger set of research questions that were about interpretation more generally. It's a project that's called Interpreting the Field, and it's focused on field interpreters who work for human rights or humanitarian organizations. And it was framed by really 3 questions. More, but they're sort of encompassed in these 3 questions. Thinking about what is entailed materially and affectively in standing between a UN field officer and what is called in the UN lingo a local client, who is, the interpreter speaking in 2 voices at once, neither of which is one's own. And in this context, interpreters are expected to translate in the first person. And in this particular context, the stories that they translate may, in some cases, actually resemble their own, because all the interpreters in the camp are also refugees. So then the second question is, what happens subjectively when the medium for circulating the voices of so-called global citizens is another human being whose labor is often imagined as the output of a machine? Often considered, and I have many examples from research elsewhere where interpreters are sort of actually literally, treated like machine, pressed on the shoulder, as if they could just translate. This was a button to be pushed. And at its broadest level, the research explores the historical and cultural connections between the invisibility of an interpreter's labor and the bureaucratic ideals of transparency and global citizenship, asking how these ideals are embodied or not in the day-to-day work of a UN mission. I think I should just say from the outset that this is a multi-sited research based in my original expertise is in Nepal, where I did a lot of research with interpreters who work for a UN mission there. And so I think importantly, this research is not framed around the category of refugee. Even though the context in which the group and the project the portion of the project that I'll be talking about now is a refugee camp. And the people that I am working with fit into the subject category of refugee. It is not actually framed around like refugee studies or anything. And that, I think, changes the nature of what we did together. We can talk about that later if you want. Okay, so I went into this project many years ago with sort of standard methodology of an anthropologist, ethnographic research, which is, inherently about and with the community that we are researching and writing about. It involves bringing intellectual questions about interpreters' work and interpreters' experiences into dialogue with the intellectual and practical questions that are raised by interpreters who I might speak with. It involves the sort of classic method of anthropology is participant observation, which is what Clifford Geertz has called, a sense of just being there, long-term, extensive time with a group of people, observing and participating, learning how to speak the language. And I will say right now that though I spent extensive time in Nepal, I do not speak Swahili, and I do not, which is one of the languages spoken in the camp. And obviously in the camp, it's a multilingual site, and I don't speak any of those languages, but I do. But because it's in the camp context where the language that most people speak is English with while they're doing their work, everybody that I work with speaks English. And the language that I will say I had to learn over the course of this year was really the language of the humanitarian world and the language of the sort of NGO humanitarian world that that dominates there. So also we do interviews and one-on-one open-ended interviews and focus group discussions. So I will say that obviously the pandemic changed all of that because I had planned to go and spend some time in the camp and actually multiple visits, and had to change quite a bit of my methodology. I should say that, this research, I should have said this earlier, but the research was generously supported by Foundation for Anthropological Research, Werner Gren, as well as KARC, which is for multi-sited research, as well as OSIN. And Werner Gren specifically said to all of us who are under their funding agency, okay, now the pandemic has started, you have to redesign your research, and it has to be remote. We're not allowing anyone to travel anywhere. So I had to think about what to do when the basic methodology was face-to-face interaction. And so I ended up basically hiring, through transforming that money that I had for my own travel, to hiring a group of people to work with me. This is the call for participation that started in October. We didn't end up doing, because of all the permitting, we didn't end up doing the interviews for this until January. But I will say what made this possible, you can see it's sort of maybe cut off for you, is my collaboration with another organization that's based in the camp called Enzone, which is an organization that is run out of the University of Geneva, which I've had some collaboration as part of my research project, in part because they started as an organization that was devoted to providing training for humanitarian interpreters. And it's a whole nother story why that did not it continued for some years, but is no longer continuing. So one of the things I did was obviously have to get people phones, and this was our main form of connection. And then we basically set up a schedule, and I thought I would read to you briefly my a little piece that I've written that should give you a sense of what it was like doing this research together. And I will go through some pictures as I'm reading, and this is called the Pandemic Field. One professor in a white button-down shirt with its sleeves rolled up is sitting at a nearly empty office desk in Kenya. The other professor, bundled in a thick wool sweater in Minnesota, is holding a ceramic cup filled with steamy tea. The pandemic has forced me to reimagine fieldwork, to construct a remote research plan, a seemingly impossible feat, especially given that I'm launching a new project about field interpreters in a place I've never been, with people I've never met. I greet the Kenyan professor virtually from my black box. He has done his own research on interpreters and sits calmly, nodding, and provides citations to several papers he's written. He has never been to the camp. We discuss my idea of collecting interpreters' diaries, informal writings about their days, memories, work, contexts. He leans forward, close to the screen, raises his eyebrows with some skepticism. This may not be nice to say, he begins warily, but be careful. If you ask people to tell stories, well, then they may very well tell stories. The pandemic field takes shape on the reflective screen of Zoom. 7 faces from 6 different nations, Darfur, South Sudan, Somalia, Democratic Republic of Congo, Burundi, and the US, meet 2 days each week to discuss interpreting in the camp. 6 of them live in Kakuma and are brought together by this research and their shared experiences as interpreters. We arrange a regular schedule, a template of writing and discussion points that are quickly dubbed in NGO lingo, the work plan. In the mornings, Hassan, Emmanuel, Muna, Charles, Juma, and Bashir discuss questions I provide and write in their interpreter's diary. In the afternoons, in their afternoons and my early mornings, we gather on Zoom. I know their faces perhaps better than I might have in person. Only heads and voices appear on the screen. So much of fieldwork is about the senses that help you know a place and people. But here, what is most present to me is our distance, the intense heat and the frigid cold, the afternoons and the early mornings, the frequent network interference and the smooth connection. I grasp at familiar fragments to piece together context, beads of sweat on foreheads, plastic water bottles, blue plastic chairs, cleanly painted green windowsills, students or staff shuffling by the office, blue tin roofs atop cement buildings, a dusty courtyard surrounded by stone walls, a blue gate, and a ring of trees. Over time, the cameras turn off. The network works better this way, and it requires fewer internet bundles to connect. I am now the only visible person on the screen. This setting of disembodied voices strangely echoes the work we are exploring together. Emmanuel tells me that interpreters are like spirits. They channel the voices of others and speak without being seen. Detaching their voices from themselves is a matter of professional labor. Becoming the eye of another, speaking their stories, is their charge. The task of sharing photographs becomes a mode of engagement. One picture displays a group of interpreters years ago proudly holding up their certificates after completing a course in basic interpretation from the University of Geneva that has been since discontinued. Hassan asks to meet after our group session to explain another photograph he has shared. The photograph depicts 4 interpreters all donning the same blue t-shirts, all striking a common pose. With their backs to the camera, they are glancing over their shoulders as a photographer outside the frame, grinning. The backs of the t-shirts are inscribed with inspirational words about refugees and the insignia of UNHCR. These t-shirts were given as a gift to Hassan and his colleagues on World Refugee Day in 2016. Mostly, Hassan explains, because we were going to the field. His voice rises in animation as he recalls a conversation with the UNHCR officer. All the other national staff, Kenyans, had been given these t-shirts to celebrate World Refugee Day, but the interpreters were, in his words, denied. We raised a little complaint, Hassan tells me. How should we look if we go to the field? We are totally different than the staff, who are all wearing the World Refugee uniforms, and we don't have it. The officer reflected for a moment and then quietly beckoned for them to follow him down the long corridors of the UNHCR offices. Okay, you are not considered eligible for these shirts, Hassan reports the officer saying, but I have seen it's really painful. The shirts are not for all interpreters, only for those who are going to the field. The irony that only non-refugee staff had been given World Refugee t-shirts was not lost on Hassan. Without a t-shirt, how is anyone to know that interpreters are not simply refugees, but also UNHCR staff at work? We look back at the photograph, and that man, Hassan tells me, pointing to one of the interpreters in the photograph, he has disappeared, taken a bribe, or that's what they say. I don't know. There are many stories I could tell you when you come. So from this piece, you can see that, we had a lot of engagement through photographs, and we also did interviews. We developed questions collectively based on some of what they had written in their interpreter's diary. That was a major part of the method that I developed virtually, was these set of questions that I would give them, and then they would just simply write about the days of interpreting. We also, because they were doing interviews, we did an ethics course together on how to do interviews and how to be ethical about getting consent. We wrote the consent forms together. They did some transcriptions. I taught them how to do transcriptions. We then had brought some of those interpreters to then interview with me as well. And we also developed a contract history of interpreters' work with the UNHCR. In many ways, I would say that I had to learn from my side how to sort of be an NGO in a way, because that was partially what seemed to be happening. But also this was a moment in which my own research and teaching were kind of merging together as I was teaching methodologies that I would use myself. Another sort of major part of our pandemic research together was the sharing of films that had been developed by Enzone, the group that I was collaborating with in the camp. And they had made a series of very short films that were based on, that were supposed to be used, I think, for teaching module that never happened. And that's a whole other story. But these were sort of unfinished films. And I thought this is a good way to just, for us to begin discussing. They became much more to discuss, what's going on in these films and what they thought of them, what, people who had been in these contexts thought of the films. And this became much more involved in ways that I did not expect at all. I don't think any of us expected, in part because many of these people in the films were their colleagues and people, and they knew some of the people. So because of the virtual medium, we began inviting some of the people in the films to join us on Zoom and look at these films together. And so films became much more than simply discussions of interpretation. It also became a kind of memory and connecting to people. Some people had relocated to Utah or to North Carolina, South Carolina, Toronto. Some people were still in the camp. So in this photo, you can see that I think this person here is visiting and is sort of in his younger self there. Most of the people had not seen these films before because they were never used and they were sort of unfinished. So that was also fun. This is a friend who, I don't know if she's here or not, but I did invite her to this talk, who was an interpreter and has since relocated to Minnesota. So here we are watching these films together and then also discussing them. And it was in the course of watching these films and with other people, that one person or two, or somehow we collectively, I guess, came up with the idea. Somebody said, we should do a film. And I have no background. I have some background in analysis of media and teaching about media, but no background in making film. I have taught with a colleague, I think who's here, Jackie, a class on ethnography through sound, image, and text, in which the students did do films. So through that, I have learned a little bit, but really I said, I've never done a film, and nor do I have the budget for the film, but let's see what we can do. And so this was something that the group was really interested in doing. And so let me just see, whoops. So they applied actually for an OSIN grant that was based in East Africa, and got that grant to continue researching and transform their research, the research that we had been doing, into a film. So this is them meeting. This is Rebecca, who I'm not sure if she's here today, but she runs the OSIN research hubs, and this is where they got sort of the funding for the production of this film. It meant that we expanded to include another organization in the camp called the Youth Voices of Kakuma, which is a community-based organization that teaches filmmaking. And so these are some of the people, and they also, this is John Thomas, and this is when I was able to go, I'll talk about that, who is their film advisor, who runs YVK, Youth Voices of Kakuma. And he became their film advisor, designing sort of courses for them to take to learn the skills of filmmaking. So together we were sort of advising and also participating in this process of filmmaking. For me, it meant a shift in my research. Again, as all ethnography is, because we are generally just participating in what's going on at the moment, often the research shifts. And so I sort of turned my attention to thinking about what it was to do this film. And here's them learning some of the film camera work. For me, it became an opportunity to think about, and I'm still in the process of thinking about, the differences and similarities between acting and interpreting. Of course, acting is a kind of performance in which you embody another person and another person's words that have been written usually by somebody else. And then interpreting, you are supposed to remain a kind of neutral conduit of voice, as I've been calling it, in which you're simply animating and not supposed to embody that person or perform for them. But as we will see, or as our research is showing, that maintaining that neutrality is often not possible, even though it's a desired and sort of professionally professed ethic. And in some cases may not, in fact, be preferable. So we can talk about that. So these are some images of some of my collaborators working on script writing and camera work, and ultimately then this project became a project of self-representation, because all the people involved in the filmmaking were, while it was based on lots and lots of interviews with lots of interpreters, they all were kind of representing their work. I think what became key for me in this film as the script developed is that the film was not focused specifically on the testimonies and the work of the actual interpreting work. There are a few scenes, and we'll share a little bit from the film, but it was really about the daily life of interpreters. And in this sense, it broke the conventional representation of both interpreters and of refugees, because it took place in lots of places of daily life that were not focused primarily on suffering. They were not focused primarily on, although those ideas do occur in the film. It follows the sort of daily life of two fictive characters who end up working in the same office by chance. And there are scenes in the cinema hall, in a church, there's a scene at home, there's scenes in the offices, there are scenes on the road, in front of the reception center. It became a kind of entry, and for me, a very ethnographic entry into everyday life. It also, I should say, in addition to all of these classes and learning about filmmaking and camera work and sound and script writing and lighting and working with actors, we continued our research, and that meant that we invited many of the interpreters that had been interviewed before to engage in focus group discussions about the film, about possibilities for the film. So there was a lot of input from the community of interpreters on what should be in this film. In addition, and this is a sort of, here we're watching some of the footage that they had taken as practice. We were watching that together. We did that. We also had workshops with filmmakers, and we watched films together. And here, this is a workshop that we had with two filmmakers, Max and Abed, a German filmmaker and a Syrian filmmaker, who shared their film with us. We talked about their film, then we invited them back, and they looked at the script. We also had with our colleague Jackie Goss came on at one point, and we had a workshop with Jackie. Jackie was showing them, how to think about different shots, close up, medium, and wide shots. And here we are sort of discussing the script together, and Jackie's example of how to do storyboarding. In addition to that, we presented. And I think this was an important part of the research process and thinking about community research. We presented together, somewhat like we're doing today. We did, and again, this was facilitated by the virtual medium. We did the annual meetings in anthropology. I was part of a group that was doing a podcast. For that podcast, we sort of staged a conversation that echoed the kinds of conversations that we typically had. It was about sound and justice. They presented on their own at the Collective on Education, Decolonization, and Emergencies conference. And so I think that was an important part. And then finally, as the pandemic subsided, I did get to go to Kenya very recently, and it turns out I went during the film shoot. So that was a new experience for me. I then became an actor, having never acted in my life. I became an actor in their script. And so we'll share with you this very brief clip. And again, it's unedited, so you won't be able to hear the sound very well. But basically, this is a scene in which there are, these two people are Kirundi applicants applying for, to become refugees. And this is the interpreter here, whose name is in the script, Jackie. One of the things they did was put the names of all the characters were people that we had collaborated with over the course of the year. And my name is Sonia, who is another person I think I did miss, let me just see if I missed. Yeah, okay, well, one of the other slides I had, was about the fact that we, in addition to watching films together, we also read together. So we were engaged in other representations of interpreters' work, also in scholarly work. So that was very interesting. Okay, so I will just play a very short bit of this clip. I'm gonna have to skip because there's a lot of, you'll see this is unedited. So
rolling. Yeah.
Okay. C9, take 1, roll 22, wide shot. Standing by. There we go. Holding for sound. Tafadhali hapo tuzime hizo simu.
okay, I'm going to skip ahead here.
Okay. Okay, good to go. Okay, there we go. And action.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the interview. This is my colleague, Jackie, who we've been waiting for.
Kazi muri kiganiro uyu ni Jacqueline umusobanuzi twari turindiriye kandi ntashobora kudutoteza ntitwemerere ko turi mu transit nasohoka agenda ashobora kumwemerera
iko shida hii translate iko shida huko nchi.
What are they saying?
Hii shida mingi.
The idea was to invent an interpreter since my tribe and ends have a contribution in our country.
Oh, it's okay, it's okay. Don't worry. You have a right to get another interpreter. Hello? Yes, this is Sonia. Yeah, could you send in another Kirundi interpreter, please? Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. It's okay. Someone else is coming. It's okay. No worries. 1 minute. Sorry. So what's happening in that scene, which you probably can't hear, is that the applicants here are contesting this interpreter and saying they don't want this interpreter because they can tell that this person is from a warring group from their home country. And so they are asking for another interpreter because they don't trust this person. And so, here we can see immediately that a person is not a neutral machine at all, but a socially recognized person immediately, and sometimes are rejected because of where they're from. Okay, so I will just say that this was a very intense week. I had never been on a film set before. It was an intense week with 1 day of rehearsal and then 3 days of filming and then tour around the camp. And I obviously learned an enormous amount being there. But this was all facilitated because we knew each other pretty well from our meetings that had been going on over the course of the year. So even though there's a lot that I learned during that visit, it was made a lot easier. And, we already had some rapport together. So I'm going to stop here and pass on. I think I spoke way more than I was supposed to, but I'm going to pass on the presentation to my colleague, who I think is here. Is Shushu here? Yes, he is. Okay, so to my colleague, Shushu, who made this slide actually for the presentation that they did for SEED. And he's going to talk a little bit about the difference in this research and other research that he has been involved in. So I'll just keep this slide up and mute myself if I can. I wonder if I can do that. And Shushu, if you would like to, I don't know if it can change their Shushu. Yeah, okay. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, good morning to people from where it is morning, and good afternoon to the rest of the team. I'm very glad to finally join. We are having a very busy and windy day. So this slide, after the long journey we had together with Professor Laura, conducting this research based on the interpreter's daily life, and actually the interpreters who work in the humanitarian settings specifically. So we've seen changes. We've seen some differences and changes according to how this research was conducted. First of all, I think she talked about the pandemic. The pandemic was one of the major obstacles enhancing us to be all together in the field. And also the differences between this research and other research is that this research particularly, instructed us and helped us and to develop our mind, because most of the research conducted here in Kakuma are based on material support, such as water. You will hear a researcher is coming to do a research about water, about food, the type of food people eat here. And now the perspectives, or the expectations of the subject, or the people who are being researched on, expect to be helped get this material support, of which is very different from this research, because from the very beginning she made it clear that she's not a humanitarian, you know, and the expectations and also maybe what we were thinking may happen quite popped differently in our minds. So that's what I can talk about. And due to reading articles, watching, oh yeah, sorry, telling the kids to give the silence because I'm at school right now. So through the research we were doing and reading so many and different articles and also watching different movies, films, and inviting the people who made those films to have discussion, it came into my mind that an interpreter should be referred to as a scale of justice. And for me, I felt like the word interpreter or being an interpreter is like pronouncing the word justice itself, you know, because there's no way justice can be served when people don't understand each other. When there is difference or difficulties in listening or understanding each other. That's why I referred an interpreter as a scale of justice. And you can see from my end, it's on my right side, the first arrow shows an interpreter. Yeah, okay, according to how I'm seated, yes, that's it. And now down there's an applicant or beneficiary. Mostly we refer to ourselves as beneficiaries, you know. And to the other angle, there's an officer or the caseworker or the service providers. But now we were happy, and we were actually happy and open to share our story, because this is our daily life. This is what we live. This is what we do. And the challenges we face, we were actually happy to share with Professor Laura to tell her what happens and what is happening and probably what may happen, because there's no changes, but we still work on that. Because, you know, at mostly they always say that, you know, you are helping your community, you are helping your people, since we are the beneficiaries, but we are still being used as interpreters. But now, in terms of salary or motivation, we are referred as incentive. So we are not legally hired, because even the contracts, all those challenges, all those stories, we were happy to really share with Professor Laura. So that's what I can talk. That's what I can say about the differences between the other researches conducted in Kakuma to this research we've been doing, because we were able to be introduced to different platforms of, like Zoom, conducting a virtual research for a whole year, and also happens to change, because most of the time the research is about writing a book, writing an article, you know. But for us, Laura is working on writing a book about this research, and we are also focusing on making a film. So it's a kind of bringing awareness to our community, at the same point, bringing awareness to the people we work for. Let them understand what we go through. You know, okay, we don't expect anything. We don't expect Laura to go to be our voice there, to go and and advocate on our behalf, because she's not a humanitarian. Yes, she's just collecting her data, what she felt like doing a research on me. So that's what I can say all about the research. Thank you. If I missed anything, you may remind me. Thank you.
Thank you, Shishu. So I think then we are going to have Komoso go, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I don't know whether, hold on. I don't know whether Kamoso has the ability to share his screen. Caitlin, Kamoso, you would like to share your screen yourself?
Yeah, let me just try. I think I might be able. Let me try and then see.
Yeah, okay, good. Oh, we're seeing. Okay,
I think everyone can see my presentation.
yes.
Okay, so good afternoon. We are in the afternoon here, probably in the other side of the world. It might be in the morning and then good morning. I am also part of this team. I'm a collaborator. I'm Kamoso Jean Bertrand, that's my name. And we have been working with Laura on this research as a collaborator. And then I'm just going to present about one scene, which is in the film that we are currently editing. We are done with shooting, and then for now, we are in the post-production stage whereby we are doing our editing. So I'm just going to be commenting or to talk a lot about one of the scenes that is in our film. That's why I'm going to talk about research as a reflection in the mirror. Actually, there is a film whereby you have a mirror, and then we just decided to do it because it has a lot or a huge meaning to us and to the community and to the audience that we've shown this film. Actually, this is one of the scenes whereby an interpreter was trying to look at himself. I will play this scene after we are done with this presentation. But in the summary, this is a scene whereby an interpreter was interpreting, and then since he was interpreting a traumatic story, so that interpreter also got traumatized, and then he was not able to continue interpreting, and then he moved outside, he washed his faces, and then he just went through the mirror. Yeah, so that's why you can see even here, mirrors are used most of the time in the film as a reflection moment of dejection, contrast and comparison, breakdown or breakthrough. So in this presentation, for me, I will just be focusing on reflection moments and sometimes on moment of dejection. So actually, you know that dejection is a sad or depressed state or a raw spirit. You know, in this work of ours, actually, we are interpreters and we have been working as interpreters. And most of the time, we used to interpret for people who faced or who went through traumatic events in their countries. Some of them, they saw many traumatic events whereby their parents, their children were killed while looking at them. Others were raped. So while you are interpreting such story, and then you can, once you also you have experienced the same, it's like you are remembering what you went through, and then sometimes it's also affecting interpreters. Being interpreters at the same time, they have experienced the same story. So this is what happened to this person, and then sometimes we do feel some kind of dejection. So that's why sometimes we just come together so that we can get this time of reflection to see what we can do, what can be done, something like that one. So actually, this research that we have been doing with Professor Laura was a kind of therapeutic or healing for us. Normally, interpreters are affected by traumatic message 3 times. So by the time they are listening to the client, and by the time they are processing the message in order to be able to render it to the other language, so which means that an interpreter processes that traumatic message 3 times. So which means an interpreter is at risk, at higher risk, more than that person and more than an officer who is listening to that traumatic event. So that's why for us, as I was saying, it's like a reflection. It was like a reflection for us, because normally other officers, other humanitarian officers who used to come to work here in the camp, they have those time to go for R&R, for rest and relaxation. But for interpreters, we don't have those times. So you just go to work, you interpret, and then you go home. You cannot have that moment so that you can just get a therapeutic or healing mentally due to those messages that you have been interpreting. And due to this, by the time we were working with Professor Rhoda, we had that good time. Since we have been interpreting, we have been inviting other interpreters for focus group discussion. We have been interviewing them. So by sharing our message, by sharing our challenges, and by sharing what can be done so that our challenges can be worked on, it was like something, it was like a healing to us. You know, normally we have realized that if you have a problem and then you get someone to tell to, or you have someone to exchange, you can just get a bit of healing of that problem. But before this research, it's like we didn't get that time to come together as interpreters to share our stories, because we have been sharing our stories, our experiences, and our challenges. So that was a good moment for us to just get something like a therapeutic healing due to those challenges we used to face. And also, it's like, as we have said, humanitarian organizations, there are those international and there are those also Kenyans who work here. For those ones, they have a special moment for them. Probably after 2 months, they have to go outside the camp, they relax, they just refresh their mind so that they can come back, they can come back fresh. But for us, we don't have that time, or we don't have that occasion. So that's why I was saying that this research was something different for us or for interpreters. And also another thing that I would like to add on what my colleague has already said, the difference between this research and other research conducted in our community. So actually here in the camp, we have been seeing so many types of researchers and researchers. They used to come and conduct researches on different topics, different subjects. But for this one, it's like it was a bit different from those other researchers. I have realized that this research used a method called participatory action research or community-based participatory research. So I think Rora didn't tell us about this one. For Rora, probably we thought it's an ethnographical research, something like that one. But I came to realize this since other people, as you can see from this statement, by this researcher, the team from outside used to come and swam all over the town, ask these questions that were not a business, and then disappeared and never be heard again. So this was a statement from another researcher also. He was trying to mention the difference between this method and the other method of researches. But for this one, it's an approach that involves fully the subject in question. In our case, interpreters were fully involved, and then we just shared our challenges, our stories, and then we also had an intimate work relationship with the researcher, who is Professor Rora. And then this one just assist us or gave us that opportunity to take another step and then to be able to make our own film. Because I remember by the time Professor Rora came and we started this research, we didn't know that we could just go further and then make our own film. So That's why researching with interpreters, not on or about those interpreters, it's also a good thing, because if we are researching with people who are affected with a certain issue, so it can just give them, it can just open their eyes and then they can see far so that they can just do something else. And also another thing, I think another difference is that other researchers, as I have said, that they used to come here and then after 1 week, 2 weeks, and then they just go. So we cannot know the outcome. We cannot know the outcome of that research. Am I audible? It's like I had an issue with the network.
Now you're audible.
Okay, so I was just saying that the difference between this research and other researchers, that it has an impact on the subjects that are being researched on. So that's what I can say in summary on the difference between this research and other researchers. Something else that I would like to talk about is that this research was like a mind decolonizing tool for us. So for us, it was an opportunity to learn how to be self-reliant, not to be depending always on incentive and humanitarian aid. So actually here in the camp, most of us, before we were just relying on this small incentive. Actually, interpreters are not called workers, they are called incentive, and then they are paid as incentive workers. So for us, it was also something like to be decolonized mind in our mind, and then we got a chance to open our eyes so that we can see other opportunities. We also acquired some skills that can be expand our work as we moved to filmmaking industry, and then that we can be able to combine them, both interpretation and film, and we can be able just to merge them in something that we can call dubbing, whereby we can just have a lot of work and then interpreters can come together, and it can be also something of healing, because film, most of the time film can be entertaining, educational, something like that one. So if we can merge this whole thing together, it can be something which can be mind decolonizing, because while we are here focusing only on one thing, focusing on humanitarian aid, so we cannot see our tomorrow. But if we can have different perspectives, or if we can have different ways of the future or different solution on something, so we can just get further. And we also critically discussed the condition of work for interpreters in the camp, and that also gave us that time to think about what also can be done apart from this interpretation, translation, or what else can be done so that we can combine this translation and filmmaking. And finally, I would like to talk about the impact of this film or this research to the interpreters and to the community. So actually, it has brought the social change to the interpreters. By the social change, I'm just talking about, we have moved from interpreting words to film industry, and we are now planning to work on merging the film and interpretation by doing film dubbing, which can create an intimate relationship between interpreters. So before we did this, there was not that intimate relationship between interpreters, because there was not that that can make interpreters to come together or to work together. So, but by the time we started this and by the time we started thinking about to make a film, it's like there is a little change that came in our interpretation community or in interpreters community, since we are seeing other ways of putting or focusing our interpretation skills. And also this research or this film, we remove the false myth and perception of the community towards interpreters. In our community, there are some perception or myths towards interpreters because interpreters are seen like officers, and in our film, there is also one scene that a refugee or an applicant in the community was trying to beg an interpreter to assist him or her so that he can get served. But actually, interpreters have not that mandate of assisting refugees. They are just only there to interpret. So this film will just be there to educate and to make the awareness in the community about interpreters' work and the interpreters' limitation to the service of humanitarian organization. It will also give the message to the international organization that use interpreters in their field mission. So probably those organizations, they are not aware about the challenges that interpreters face in their daily life or in their daily work. So this film will be just a message to them so that they can get all those challenges, they can be aware of what's happening in the field so that they can just take an action on those issues, and the interpreters can be improved their work condition. Because most of the interpreters, even if they work with organization, international organization, most of them are not trained. So if this message can just reach to the people, the concerned people, they can just make some changes. And also this film has equipped us with the new skills in filmmaking. So we have been gained those skills, and then these skills can make us or can help us to be able to teach other fellow interpreters, or can help us to pass the messages to other people. So that's what I can say in summary, and then thank you so much for your attention.
Okay, so I think that I will share the screen for Mulkey and Adam. Looks like we're going way over time when I have time for questions, so they will go through their presentation quickly. So I think I will share the screen for Mulkey now. Okay.
Hello, I hope I'm audible enough.
Yeah.
And be heard. Good morning to you guys, and good afternoon to the rest of us. I'm sure why the bridge was an important way to present our research in a frictional way. For the first reason was for security reason, to protect actors and ourselves from the humanitarian agency, and it was the only way to protect the people who participated together with the interpreters during the research and the filmmaking process. Because these people, the people who participated, mostly our researchers, who during the research, who put their ideas and opinions and their story lives, their daily lives into to share it with us, and to share it with us. Those people are working for the humanitarian agencies. To present the daily lives of interpreter was a very important in the filmmaking process. We have agreed that this fictional the bridge, the film, our film, The Bridge, it was important way to present as a research in a fictional way, to present the daily life of interpreters, like the struggles, the challenges they are facing, which, for example, the low stipend payment, the incentive payment, and the delayment payment, and the transportation issues they are facing. So that's why we are fictional way. To present the interpreter's idea and opinions in the film was an important aspect in the film. To bring the people who participated during this research was they shared their ideas, their opinions on making of this film, and to put them in the film was an easy way, and it was an important reason why. Fictional allows us to write in the way we wanted. When we were writing the script of the film, we wanted to present the struggle, the challenges, to put them in a motion to show that the interpreters, to show that the community of the audience, that this is what interpreter go through, and they think as an interpreter we are able to help them in their resettlement or their protection cases we interpreted, to show that interpreters have no power than interpreting in the field office. The next slide, please. So this was different opinion around the end of the film. Some of the interpreters we have shared the script with about the film, and the crew members and actors and interpreters were not happy with the end of the film because of our film ends with a strike whereby the interpreter comes together and discuss about the challenges, the strategies they facing, the treatment, the harsh treatment they get from the officers. And it was very hard condition for them to work on. So they talked together and they presented those challenges to the officer, the humanitarian officer, and there were no changes, and it passed like some time, like a month or a year, and you find that they weren't changed. They're still facing the challenges, the low delayment payment, the incentive payment, and the transportation issue, the trauma events they get from their working. And so they decided to strike, and some of the interpreters continue working while others were chased away from the work, like they were fired. So we decided to end the film in this way because interpreters need changes from organization they work for. So and most of us, like the group members, we had a different opinion among the group members about the end of the film. One member of the group had an idea that we end the film by an interpreter opening his or her own business and leaving the professional work of interpreting, which could have been a good ending because it would point out to how the film began and also how the message. However, we wanted to change to come from those humanitarian agencies. They should see the challenges, the struggles interpreter go through in working in their daily life as an interpreter. So they should improve the their work strategies so that the interpreter can be able to work freely. And we wanted the community to understand the challenges interpreters are facing in their daily life. Most of the community we interpret here in the camp think that interpreters have the power to help them to access their rights or anything else, but mostly interpreters are there to help. They don't have power. You find them that for them to see this, they can understand and to make our life easier. And here is a scene where Emmanuel and Andrew, Emmanuel is an interpreter and Andrew is an officer, where when the interpreter strikes, this is the end of the film where interpreter strikes, and the officer, the supervisor of the interpreter, the officer Andrew, comes out and address them and tell them, why don't we talk one by one so that we can see how we can help you about whatever you're going through. And most the interpreter go through those to talk about the challenges they are facing. And here, Emmanuel, we can listen. Can you play it, please?
Scene 18, take 1, roll 80, pose up shot, crossing the front. Standing by, there we go. Take it, Andrew, and action.
Emmanuel. Yes. Emmanuel, what the problem with you? I know that we had a circumstance, but we are about to fix it. And what I know is there is nothing that cannot be fixed. You've paralyzed my work and don't know what the meaning of it. My question is, do you still want to work with us or something else?
Yeah, thank you. You know, I've always loved working for you, but these issues that we are going through, I feel like they are really jeopardizing my decision to this work. Because remember, I've been raising these issues for like 6 months now, talking about transportation, the delayment of our stipend, even the stipend itself is very little, but we have agreed and accepted to work like that. But most of all, it's delaying, and that's why now these challenges are coming in, you know, to make it to work. Even the border carries us to work, most of the time they refuse to bring us to work due to that. And also something I wanted you to know, you know, and I know that you know it, because we deal with traumatic cases. We don't even have assistance like attending the therapeutic sessions, but we handle, you see. So that's why I don't think I can continue unless you make changes or you take action on the issues that we've been raising. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Then call me for the next person.
Okay, thank you.
Sakat.
Mulkey, I'm just looking at the time and I think that we should just not do the next, the next scene so that Adam can speak quickly because we won't have time for questions.
Okay, that's fine with me.
Okay. I mean, I think it's worth saying that what happens after this is that Emmanuel gets fired from the job, and that's the last scene. Okay. Okay. Adam, do you want to say a few words? I can share the screen quickly for Adam, but I am looking at the time, so we're going to move through this quickly. and see if people can see this. Okay.
Excellent. Yeah,
Okay.
it's clear. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Nice, thank you. It is my pleasure being here today with you. As my professor had already introduced you, my name is Adam Muhammad and I'm a Sudanese nationality. A refugee currently based in Kakuma refugee camp, and I work as interpreter as a collaborator with Professor Laura on the interpreter's daily life on the ground here in Kakuma. Today on this platform, I'll be talking about Kakuma interpreters and the challenges during the production stage of the film. So when I highlight this word, the challenge during the production stage of the film is the time when we face the challenge during the shooting period when we are shooting. So here is the lighting. When I say lighting here, I mean that the time we were shooting the film, we had some few challenges in the first scene, whereby the light had to go off when the camera was rolling, and actors are on the ground, displaying their role. So the light suddenly had to go off because the battery was low, and we have to wait for a few minutes, so as the lightman has to replace the batteries, then we have to continue the journey to the scene. Now, the second way is sound. We had some challenges during the shooting too as well. Sounds, it must be connected together with the camera to work closely together. So here, the sound sometimes also used to go off because of battery. The reason why batteries are always so, less in power, it is because here in Kakuma Refugee Camp, our power mainly being supported through solars, and we don't have electricity. So the solar, sometimes when the sun is not shining too much, so they don't produce too much power. So in this case, the batteries sometimes they do go off, and then sound will let us in silent. So we have to also have a few minutes to rest, waiting for the soundman to replace the batteries. Sadly, looking for extra cast members in the community. Here, this is whereby we are having a scene in the church. And to play this scene, we need at least 50 people extra. And then we have to go in the community and look for extra cast members in the community so as to come and support us together, because we're not so enough to play this scene. So that's whereby we brought different people from different nationalities, from different communities to come together in the church to help us stand together, play these scenes in the church. How to serve the crew members and the actors. Here, that is, time we were in the field, we were not enough. Cameraman is busy, sound lady is busy, director is also busy on his side, and other colleagues are busy with other activities. So when we come in the field whereby actors need water, we have to serve. So one person handles 2 to 3 work positions at the same time. The reason was because we weren't enough. If we could have been enough, then each person could have represented a position. But due to lack of people, we have to do so by our own self, collaboratively with our Professor Laura, who was on the ground with us, sharing this, these ideas together with us. So herself also sometimes, she has to do some slate writings. Then unfortunately, the actor will say, "I need water." She has to go and serve. So because we didn't have somebody else who can serve us, that's what we have been doing. Fifthly, availability of the actors. Availability of the actors, hereby we mean that we didn't have an accurate person or exactly person who will keep on calling the actors. So we ourselves, we have to make ourselves busy, and we have to make sure that all the actors are on the ground, especially those who have been shortlisted for that particular days. So we have to keep on calling, like when I'm busy, my other colleague who is already has to call them, or director himself has to call them. So this is how we're being very busy, collaboratively working together to make sure all the actors are on the grounds. Because if one particular actor is missing on that particular day, then it will be hard time for us to reschedule the scene or to find somebody who will play that role. Now, about money, absolutely money was a main challenge for us because, the project that we're running, it was a low budgeting project. So we didn't have enough money to pay the actors for transport, going home and coming back home. So what we did, we have called the actors, and then we put them together and we explained to them together. We convinced them that we are a group of interpreters doing a kind of research, and we're going to make a film about interpreters' daily life and our community. And we have a kind of budget, but it's not too much. So, but we can do this to help you as like motivation for your daily life or your day work. So we are not able to afford you for transportation, going home and coming back at the same time, but we can give you a motivation. So it's a way of helping to collaboratively to work together. And that is how we convince the actors and other expert people to come together with us to work as a team to produce a kind of film whereby many people will get time and watch it some time to come. Environment. So when I say environment, the field where we had been shooting our film, it was really dirty in some areas. The roads were not very clean. You will come across jumping over the dirty water, and the dust was too much, and the noise was all over. It come in a particular day where we had a certain scene to be shot early in the morning, and there was noise all over. Generators were all over just crowding, and then we had to take time to find where those generators are. So we have to take time to go and talk to the generators owners. Please kindly, can you help us, to put off your generators for 30 minutes? And then here is like a kind of dialogue with them, because they tell us this is the market. You don't have to come and tell us put off the generators. Those were the main challenge, but honestly, we talked to them in a very kind way, and they told us, okay, we just gave you 30 minutes. Within 30 minutes, if you didn't do your work, then that is up to you. Then we have to go back and say, hey guys, we have just been given only 30 minutes by the generators owners. We have to do this on time, please. And that is how we did. It was a kind of challenge, but finally we did that. Consulting the owners of the location or place. Here by this, I mean, before we go to the field to play our scenes or to shoot a film, we have to consult the place owner or the owner of the place, like example, a shopkeeper. If we want to play a scene in the shop, we have to talk to the shopkeeper in advance, like when they're ahead, that on particular day, this time, we are coming to play a scene in your shop. Yes, it happens that one of the shopkeeper that we talked to, he agreed and said, it's okay, anytime you come, you're highly welcome. Now what happened? For the particular day when our day has come to go, we went and then unfortunately we talked to him and he told us that, guys, I'm really sorry. I can't help you with my shop. We should have film here. This is now, it brought us in a kind of, tension situation. So we have to find an urgent shop nearby, whereby we have to shoot this scene on that particular day because there's no way to reschedule it. And our days were so tight, And then immediately we found another shop next to it in the building, and then we have played the scene. That's what we did. Next page, slide next. Okay, thank you. Having the breakfast. Now, this is the morning hours. All the actors, crew members, we have to gather together in one particular place before the acting takes place. So here you can see our professor there. We are inside there. One of my colleagues is standing over there. So this is in the morning hours, around 7:30. We have to find a place where we can have tea, chapati with rice, and chapati with beans, and others they take a little porridge and water, before we start the journey. But by that I mean that before we go to the field, we start shooting. So, here in this particular point also, as crew members and the actors are standing line, those are the actors who have been, contracted by us to come and sign their contracts to show that they have agreed to play their role during the film or during the filming of the period when we are shooting the film. So that's why you can see they are just standing line. And here is now a scene where we have played in the church. So that's why you can see camera in shooting progress. So a person in the middle, it is me. And the next person behind me is one of the crew members, and that is another colleague of mine on my right side. So we are all watching while I'm concentrating on the camera recording, and people or congregations are inside the church. On your left or in front of you, there's a wall with a purple color or gray color in front of the camera. So the audience and the actors are all inside. So they're all there acting, and the camera is outside recording the white shots. Here it is. However, it will also lead the audience and the humanitarian workers think more deeply about what interpreters actually experience in their everyday work. By this, I mean the film that we're using is all about interpreters' daily life and the challenge that they experience, and it will be teaching them humanitarian organizations to know more about interpreters' daily life. The humanitarian organizations may ask themselves, are we real humanitarian agencies? So this question even concerns you as our guest today in this platform. If you're one of the humanitarian organization or humanitarian worker, ask yourself that question. So when they see such kind of film, they will ask themselves, are we real humanitarian agencies? Because the way interpreters have been isolated or being, not considered as interpreters without contracts and working to help their communities can make sense. So humanitarian workers have to think big about it. And they have to ask themselves these questions. Why are interpreters being isolated in this way? So when you see an interpreter just being sheltered under the trees without being given a shelter, the dust is all over and waiting to be called by the office to go and interpret. So as an officer or humanitarian worker, how do you feel on that particular moment? So that's a question to be asked by humanitarian or to be answered by humanitarian workers. Maybe this is because interpreters are less educated or because they are refugees and treated differently than citizens. Okay, in another context, I mean these humanitarian workers are treating interpreters because maybe they are not citizens or they are not fully citizens in particular country where they live, and because maybe they don't have higher standard of education. So they do treat them that way. They think that maybe interpreters are just simple people around and they don't have enough knowledge to help do everything possible. Another theme of the film may be demonstrating how courageous and patient interpreters are to publish these stories and support their communities in refugee camps or elsewhere. So here, humanitarian workers, they have to work together and create a scenario whereby they have to support the interpreters. Think of the interpreters, that interpreters are a group of people who are working hard day and night to make sure all their community members and other clients in humanitarian agencies have been supported and serviced and been helped to get access to the services that they deserve to. Next. That's the end of it. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I think we should now just open it up for discussion and questions and anything that people want to ask at this point.
Hi, welcome to the Vice Office.
Okay.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Yeah. My first question is for the presentation Mulki was presenting. She talked about security. Can she actually tell us more about the security? What kind of security they were facing? Or any of you? Will appreciate.
Okay, I will come in. When we say for the security concern, it means that the film that we're going to make is not a documentary film. And as an interpreter, you have to make sure that you are well protected before you raise the matters, before you play the film. Okay, you have to find the safety place whereby to make sure all the actors who are represented in the film are well protected, because you cannot play with somebody's life without being given a permission. This scene or the film that we're playing is not internationally being given a permission. So this is like a locally arranged as interpreters to do so collaboratively with our professor to do so. That's why we said for security purpose or security concern or reasons, that's why we say it is a fictional film. It's not a documentary film. My colleague may add more.
Thank you, Adam.
Carrie, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you so much. I wanted to just say what an amazing experience it is to see this film coming together. and to thank all the presenters for their input. I had a question coming up from, for instance, some of the questions that Adam was just raising at the very end. It seems like this is going to be a hard film for humanitarian agencies to work, right? Because it's putting an uncomfortable mirror on a lot of mythologies about the kind of work that's being done in this field. And yeah, and many of the organizations that help organizations that we're familiar with. What is your plan for screening? I apologize, I came a few minutes late, so if Laura covered this in the beginning, I apologize for the repetition, but I'm curious, like, yeah, how do you imagine really getting the film to the various communities that you want to reach? What are some of the opportunities and challenges? I put that out to the whole team.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, excellent questions. Now, some of the opportunities and challenges. As an interpreter, have been working for humanitarian organizations for more than 7 years right now. I don't see that there's any opportunities for interpreters except being interpreters to help the community. And what I have experienced with the challenge is that humanitarian organizations never consider interpreters as interpreters in their daily life, but they do consider us as cash of workers. When I say cash of workers, I mean that they just need them in a short time. They just call them, come and work for me, I pay you, you go. But in real sense, interpreters are the right people to serve humanitarians. Because if we say humanitarians, as my colleague said, he mentioned Chuchu in his skill. When he sees an interpreter or he feel like to say what interpreter is like a word of justice. But among humanitarians, there's no justice about interpreters at all. Because if you have been employed in a humanitarian context, they will tell you we are all one staff under one umbrella, but that is just a word of mouth. There's no implementation about it, and I have witnesses why. Interpreters have never been given a transportations. Interpreters in some ways are not allowed to sign contracts for more than years and work for humanitarian organizations. What kind of humanitarian organization is that? Humanitarian organizations never consider interpreters for lunch. What kind of a humanitarian organization is that? Humanitarian organizations never care for their interpreters. As my professor has mentioned a few minutes ago, it is a story being told by one of us. During the World Refugee Days, interpreters have been isolated. Instead to go for celebration together with the humanitarian organizations. They never even give them like a kind of chart to celebrate together, t-shirt, celebrate together. They have been isolated just like children who have been left at home, their father went to work. So as humanitarian organizations, our message is to you, and we make film this to address all these issues through the film. When you watch the film, you have to ask yourself as a humanitarian organization, is it really what interpreters are facing? And is it really what some of the staffs are facing? And why we interpreters have been called incentive interpreters, as my colleague said too. It's never been happening that in the humanitarian context, but today in refugee context, especially here in Kakuma, interpreters have been called incentive. What does it mean? There must be something behind it, and it's never been discovered. It is too much deep in the desert. So to find that tree has been buried in the desert, you have to dig deep. So by this I mean work hard as humanitarian workers to find the way and the reason why interpreters have been isolated from humanitarian. Thank you.
So I think,
Okay.
I don't know if someone else has something to say about the screening. Carrie's question is really about how this realization may be uncomfortable for humanitarian.
I think
Shushu, yeah.
if everyone can hear me, that's all right. I'm just going to also highlight 2 or 3 ones about the previous question that was asked about the security, and also come up to the screening point. So, we are interpreters. At the same time, we are the refugees. We serve our own people in that umbrella, but we are still under that criteria. We are also beneficiaries. We were supposed to be served, not to be serving ourselves. So since they don't have that that possibility, or people who will be able to interpret for us, let's say like the national staffs or the international expatriate, they are not able to interpret our dialects. So they use us. But now by using us, we are considered at a very, very low rate in terms of rewarding the work we do, since we are their beneficiaries and we are under incentive rate, whatever they do. So we wanted to expose this, but we also thought like twice. We thought about this. How if we expose them directly and it backfires on us? Because we are still, after all, we are still the beneficiaries. This may actually jeopardize our living, our, things like that. And we called this project or this film a bridge. We did not want to put it like, if you want to know more about it, you ask us, we will tell you what it is about and who are these people we want to expose. Because you can even hear from the organization, we looked for another name. But if you know what UNHCR does here, you will probably understand that this is directly to UNHCR, but we passed it in an indirect way, so it may not come and by fire to us. So our organization is called Action for Refugees, so that's how, metaphorically, and we called it a bridge. That's how it is, because a link between this part of the world to this other part of the world. You want to come and serve the refugees, but you're not able to talk their language. So you need another refugee who knows your language. So now there, he is the most important, because you came with your own language. But now the refugees, the people you want to serve, you don't know their language. And it happens to come a person who can speak your language and can still speak the language of the people you want to serve. Why don't you really take care of that person? So this is what we meant about security, because we are still also refugees. We did not want to go like going with a chest, and then after the end of the project, you still need service from these people you've exposed. So going to launching the film, as screening the film, as you asked, yes, the film appears to exposing these humanitarian agencies, of which we still need help from them. But you are the one who is understanding this, because we are explaining it to you. We are not sure that the person who will be watching this film tomorrow will understand that this message is indirectly, towards me. Yes, there will be people who will definitely understand, okay, this film was played like this, but the message, we actually get the message. So screening it, we have a request to Osun. Also, Osun, if they are willing, we are hoping that they may also invite other people from different sectors, maybe from the government or from other humanitarian agencies, and we screen the film and watch it together. But here also in the camp, we will have a time to screen the film here in the camp for people to watch, and those who will be able to understand what we meant will get the message.
I will say one thing about the issue of screening and also the security issue is that none of these issues will be, on the one hand, surprising to the humanitarian organizations, because all of this is based on things that they have in different ways heard, even if they haven't acted upon it. So I think that they're not necessarily going to be completely surprised, even though Adam was highlighting how they might be surprised. What they will be surprised, so some of the issues, what they will be surprised perhaps about is the context and the more depth of the sort of everyday situation, which cannot be talked about in the office. So, the fact that strikes have happened, they know that. That isn't something that is outside of the realm. They've been publicized. So in that sense, you know, it's not going to be completely surprising. How they will read it is another question.
And maybe Laura, to another, in another way of, maybe they may be surprised because, you know, they know that most of the refugees projects here, in order for it to be implemented, it has to undergo under a humanitarian agency support. So I'm thinking that this may be a surprise to them, that how these people were able to do this without any humanitarian support in bits, you know. And that's, I'm trying to picture it. It may be like a surprise to them because we didn't involve Film Ed, because Film Ed is the certified and well known as a humanitarian in filmmaking in the camp. So we did not engage them. So, yeah.
Susan.
First of all, let me just say that this is a totally fascinating and wonderful experiment that you guys have conducted, putting together, you know, the arts as a way of allowing the interpreters in this situation to express themselves and get to, I think, you know, more deeply explore their conditions and those of the camp. I'm particularly interested by the role of the sort of colonial relations within the camp, and you're thinking about that. And I hope that the film will be shown. I think, you know, I applaud your courage and your imagination, all of you. And it's a wonderful example also of the sort of politics of interpreting and translating, which often doesn't get explored in this depth. So I'd love to hear any further thoughts, and I hope that you will also write about this and that it will be published somewhere where people can hear more. But any comments any of you has on the sort of politics of this situation and how, you know, how the use of the arts perhaps has contributed to that. The fiction aspect is really interesting. I mean, I'm going on, but just because I found it so fascinating in so many respects. And thank you all very much. It's wonderful to meet and hear from you.
Thanks, Susan. I'll just start off by saying that when I have described this project to people in the making of the film, most people have asked me, oh, are you going to make a training film? Other people have asked, oh, are they making a documentary film? And so that sort of shows the part of what you're talking about, which is that the sort of means to an end type of film is the kind of genre that is expected in a project like this. In other words, the sort of colonial relationship that you're talking about suggests that a group of interpreters making a film are going to be, and with me, you know, as their, you know, advisor and lead person in the project, are going to be making something extremely practical and extremely devoted to a means to an end, training, or, okay, here's the real. And I think what fiction provides is a breaking out of that, even though it is a security issue, certainly, as they said, but it's also a way of not simply replicating humanitarian discourse in which one is, although there are replications of that, I will say that too, and we can see that even in what has been presented today, what we have presented today, there are some replications of that. But I think that what fiction provides is a way of, you know, getting out of the genre, the expected genre, and connecting to another genre, which, you know, it wasn't also interesting to describe. So I don't know if anyone else has comments on that. If Kamoso or Mulki or anyone else wants to share, if not, you know, that would be my response to to Susan. And hopefully I will be able to write. I don't know if others are going to write, but really their focus has been on the filmmaking right now.
I mean, it is important, I think, that this is a collective product.
Yeah.
Right. It's a collective experience and a kind of, the imagining is going on, not just, again, by the sort of, official filmmaker or, entitled outsider. So that also seems to me a really important piece of it.
Yeah. And I would say that's a really important piece, especially because I'm not a filmmaker. And so I was learning, I was responding, but I was learning along with them. And certainly they learned a lot more because I didn't have all the classes. Yeah, okay. Adam, it sounds like has a question or comment.
Okay, thank you for the chance. I just want to add a few words. Coming up with such a simple idea that make a film together with our professor in support. We count out this is just a beginning, and it always says beginning is half done. Our deep aim for the far light, or for the far light, I mean for the farther future, is that we would like if you can get a support whereby we'll be able to make or create an organization called Interpreters Organization, whereby all the other humanitarian workers, since they don't consider interpreters as interpreters, if it's possible, we can get support. We'll create or we can fund our own interpreters organizations, whereby humanitarian organization will come, and rent interpreters from us. So they will come and, they have to pay it. Then we'll send them interpreters worldwide. They will go and work for them. That is our aim in further future. If we can get support, like a great person like Professor, we can get support like such person like her somewhere else to be collaboratively working together to create an organization for interpreters independently, whereby, they will be interpreting for those humanitarian workers instead to be isolated and be left behind by humanitarian organization. Thank you.
Talking about colonial in this circumstance, what appears, we are kind of like breaking the silence to make the world know what we are going through and what we've been through. Now, to this extent, this research and this film is for me, I'm thinking it is like an opportunity to ending that colonial period, because in this time, okay, they call themselves humanitarian workers, service providers, and everything is free. But you found the situation, the circumstance that we live in, it's actually in the colonial time there, which we happen to read in the books what happened to our forefather. It wasn't good. But for now, it's still the same, but in a modernized way. They are doing it in a developed way, like behind they are trying to hide it hard. It's up to people to think very, very widely to figure out that we are still living in colonial time, So as for me, what I may say, this research actually, Laura, let me say congratulations, by the way, because I never thought that there could be a person who be willing to come and hear or collect information about these poor people. Yes, people may come with the idea of doing research about interpreters, but maybe, let's say, an interpreter who works in ICC, in the International Criminal Court there, is completely different from the interpreter who's working in a humanitarian setting. The way that interpreter is he's taken care of is completely different from what we. So we are called interpreter in court. It's because we don't have another way of calling another name, or let me say, like, maybe, can we say the language facilitators, things like that, because we happen to interpret a language to another language. We happen to translate document, that's why we are also so-called interpreter translators. So we are still living in that. We are only protected by that word, but the people, the people knows that meaning and the protection of an interpreter, his integrity, his everything, his right, his responsibilities. We are like living in 18s. In 18s, and others are now enjoying 20th centuries. You see the difference? That's why I'm saying in this context, we are still in the colonial time. Mm-hmm. So now, thanks to Laura, who's brought this research, and broadly, the research have expanded to a film, which is very important for us, because most people, according to the Kakuma or the humanitarian settings, people mostly like to watch and understand quickly than reading, having the whole article or a whole book to read. So thank you very much. Yeah, I don't know.
I think we're running at time and people are going to need to go, my sense is, but I'm not sure that this is a grand idea of breaking the colonial structure of humanitarian organizations. I'm not, that would be amazing, but let's see what happens with this small project. And I guess, I don't know if Aaron is maybe not even here anymore, but I think we need to end at 9. Is that correct? I mean, I'm happy to stay a little bit longer. Caitlin, you can direct us on what is appropriate.
Yeah, maybe if we have time for one more question or comment, and then we can wrap it up. I think that'd be good.
Yeah.
Okay. Could I say a few words?
Sure.
Someone wants to speak. All right, thank you. The issue of interpreters is not easy to be ended. Why I'm saying the issue of interpreters is not easy to be ended is just like the rain that dropped on the soil, or rain, and nobody knows whether, what, or how far the water has gone deep in the soil, under the ground. By this I mean interpreters are the richest people, but they are most vulnerable people in time of consideration. Worldwide, no interpreters, no communication. And I want to hear that somebody says that is not true. Why I'm saying this, if we came into realistic of word interpretation or interpreters, journalists themselves are interpreters. Whatever they report, they do interpret in different languages. If something happens today in USA, the other world need to know, those who don't speak English, what do they need to know about it? How could they know about USA? They have to be interpreted, language, whether it's been interpreted through machine or whatever, that is the style of interpretation. In this context, as we talk today, we kindly urge you as humanitarian workers, to support us to make this world globally to come together. We wish we could have one language worldwide to communicate so that there's no interpreter could be needed, but it is impossible to happen that. It is impossible. Though English is, it is a kind of like world leading language, but it's impossible all the world could have one language. That's why always interpreters is important wherever you go. My colleague says, you are humanitarian workers. You move from place to another to go and help the refugees. But when you come to the ground, your language is not supportive to access information from the refugees or from the individuals. You need somebody who speaks that particular language, plus your language, so as to connect you to access what you want or what you are seeking for or what the client is looking for. So meanwhile, I really appreciate all for you have taken your time to participate with us together, and thank you for Professor Laura inviting the great people to come and listen to our stories. I know they have come with empty boxes, but now they are going back home with a lot of boxes full, a kind of checks in, and I don't know what kind of check is that. You'll go home and open, and then have your pen and just find it out what kind of words are inside. So by that I mean that you gain a lot of information from interpreters today. Thank you for everything that you have gained with us.
Okay, thank you. I just see in the chat that Danielle has said she's happy to organize a screening at Bard. Hopefully this film, this is also a first film, so that's also part of it. And the editing process is going on right now. So we'll see how it all comes together with all the challenges. Thank you all for listening and being here.